that that information. So
Appreciate it.
yeah, one of the things that you're going to want to be thinking about, both at the pre-sentence investigation report and at the sentencing hearing, is that's going to be the best time you have to make a request for a specific institution. And one of the most important things that the Bureau of Prisons is focusing on right now, and this is not only my words, this is the director's words, the importance of people emphasizing a pathway to reentry, a release plan that you can build upon. And so when you're making your request, I want you to make that request in such a way that emphasizes the importance of being in Duluth for your release plan. What kind of work do you do?
I am a licensed, well, I was a licensed psychologist up until March 31st.
Oh, did you and I speak before?
We have spoken briefly, yes.
Yes, okay, so hold on a second. Scott, my partner, is asking to make him a co-host, and so I got to find out how to do that.
Hey, Chuck, you on
Hello,
here.
Scott.
I see you, Scott. Let's see here.
I really commend you.
There you go.
So
as I was explaining, I'm actually on my way to my dental appointment, but I thought I'd pop in for as much as I could.
Yeah, excellent idea.
We were just talking. Let's see, make co-host. Okay, Scott, I think I've just made you a co-host.
There we go.
So what you're going to want to do is you want to emphasize, like, you've got to put a couple of things in there about Duluth being the primary place possible for you to advance your release plan. And the more you can build that up, the stronger you're going to be, both in the pre-sentence investigation report. It would be great if you're able to weave that into your narrative, what you're going to do, what level of support you're going to have. Because if that goes into the pre-sentence investigation report, I think what you always have to be thinking about, everybody here, is we have to be thinking about the people that you are never going to meet, but are going to have some level of influence on your life. And we're going to talk about that in today's webinar. I'm always happy to see Cheryl. Cheryl, how are you? I know that her husband is going through this challenge right now, but it's just it's very, very important that at this very early stage, you start getting on the record. You're thinking about your release plan, and your request for a designation is not to make you comfortable, but rather to make it so that you are advancing your release plan. So like if you have maybe a mentor or a business partner who makes it easier to come and visit you in Duluth, that would be a time to enter that information. And when you're at sentencing, you're going to want to ask your lawyer to do some almost advocacy work for you right there, because the judge does not have the authority to sentence you to a specific location, but the judge does have a lot of influence. And then understanding that the Bureau of Prisons does not ever want to speak with a federal judge, we have heard that if the judge says at sentencing that he asks the Bureau of Prisons, per his release plan, I'm hereby recommending Duluth, Minnesota, so that he can continue his preparations to emerge successfully. If the Bureau of Prisons for any reason cannot recommend Duluth, then please write me separately and let me know why. Now, not all judges will do that, but if the judge does that, you're going to get it. I think that you're probably a good candidate for Duluth anyway. I was just there, and I know that it's a pretty large compound, and they were telling me that they are trying to increase the population there, whereas it used to have 900 people in that camp. Right now, it only has 300 people. So they're growing that camp. It is one of the camps that still has RDAP. So I think that it's not difficult. It's not going to be difficult for you to get to Duluth, given that's where your residence is and your release plan. But all of those things are really important for you to be thinking about as you, prepare for this difficult journey. And I know it's a difficult journey, but I know that you can do it.
Absolutely.
And I think that the more people learn about this journey, the more people are going to start restoring their confidence and feel as if they're making progress. But it is also very, very important for people who are going into this system to realize, where they're going and what challenges they're going to face. And fortunately, we have people on here that can attest to that, how difficult it is. This is for me, it's a lifelong ministry to try and change that system. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges we face when we are trying to influence changes within the system. So,
sure.
It's already 10:02. I think I'll wait till 10:05 to kind of start my prepared remarks. But I do appreciate everybody being here. I am Michael Santos, for those of you who don't know, because I'm not on these webinars as much as I would like to be. I've been traveling a lot, and I'm home only, during the month of April, I think I'm only home for 5 days. But I do get to be home for the rest of the month, and then until early May, when I head off to Leavenworth Federal Prison and Greenville Federal Prison. But today we're going to be talking about, I think, some of the challenges and the systemic problems or the systemic changes that are going on in the Bureau of Prisons, and what a person can do, what personal changes a person can make in light of those changes. So, but during this, preliminary call, if anybody wants to unmute themselves and introduce themselves and or ask a specific question, I'm open to responding to anybody. While we wait, I think I'll start at 10:05 California time.
Hi, I'm John Carlisle.
Hi, John.
How are you?
I'm glad to be talking to you.
I'm so glad that you're talking to me as well. Appreciate being here. I talked to Scott yesterday a little bit about my situation. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I want to introduce myself and tell you my goals. I was just indicted 2 months ago on some drug charges out of Pennsylvania, and terrified. I haven't gone to pretrial. I went to arraignment, but pleaded not guilty, that type of thing. In Pennsylvania, I live in Tennessee, and I'm just trying to take this. I'm on release right now, pretrial release, and so I don't know what to expect. I've never been through this, and so you
can learn a lot from these free webinars, and I don't know if you're working with Scott or not, but I always tell people we sell a lot, that's what supports the advocacy, but anything we sell, people could get for free just by spending a lot of time on the website. The thing is it's like learning about China. There's so much to learn and so many things to figure out. Sometimes that can be a little bit overwhelming, but I do want to encourage you at this very early stage, John, to make sure that you read as much as you can, you learn as much as you can, because you're making decisions today that are going to have monumental influences over your life. And part of this big challenge, I think, for a lot of people who are coming into the system is, we tend to look at our lives and our situation from our perspective, from the lens that we have. That you shouldn't be going to prison. Your wife probably knows, your mom, your dad, your children, right? They all know you as a good person. But it's going to be very important, I think, for everybody going into the system to have a very clear perspective of how leaders in the system perceive you and what can you do to influence those people. That is a very difficult lesson for a lot of people to learn, because nobody wants to think of themselves as a criminal, right? And a criminal is just a legal term, right? Right now, there are people. I'm going to give you an example. Okay, you're going to meet all kinds of people, and I'm going to give you 2 examples. And I for those of you who have seen our webinars before, you may have heard me say this before. But when I got sentenced, I remember my federal judge telling the jury, that you have to find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That doesn't mean you have to find him guilty beyond all doubt. You can still have a little doubt and find him guilty. And of course, that sends a message to a jury. On the flip side, if you've seen our website and you've watched the interviews that I have done with federal judges, you will have seen maybe the judge with the interview I had with Judge Bennett. I don't think he said this on the video. I don't remember, but he said it to me personally. He said, every time I go to a trial, I step down and I walk over to the defendant's table and I shake his hand and I look at the jury, and I tell the members of the jury, right now, I am shaking hands with an innocent man. He is innocent until you say differently. So like that's a fundamentally different message that two different judges are sending. And I don't know what kind of judge you have. All I know is that you have to be thinking about these kinds of complexities when you go into the system. You also have to be thinking about who's sitting on a jury. If you're going to go to trial and you're thinking this through, make sure you understand that, because typically the people who are sitting on a jury don't even know how to comprehend this statement of United States of America versus John, right? They can't even comprehend that. It is so beyond their approach that to think they're not biased or there's going to be a fair and impartial decision is a very heavy lift. And you want to understand that long before you make a decision on how to proceed. So with that, I really like to just welcome, and I see Sir Hott has his hand up, and I'll certainly bring you in. And I really appreciate the questions, because I think that's how we're going to learn the most. But before we get to those questions, and I want to always say there's no question that I will not respond to or answer. I want you all to know a little bit about who I am, because I see a lot of names that I've never interacted with any of you. And I just want to say thank you for trusting in us. It's your trust in our company that makes it possible for me to go out and try and do the advocacy work that I am working on right now. But I also think it is super important that everybody in our community understands those challenges. So what I'd like to do, we have as much time as it will take. Okay. I'm very, I hope everybody finds that I'm responsive and that I am willing to stay on the webinar as long to respond to everybody's questions. My partners are also on this webinar. And if you look at the bottom, you'll see that there's a section for chats. There's a little section for chats on the bottom of the Zoom screen. If anybody has a question, they should feel free to respond in those chats right there, ask those questions. And I hope that one of my partners will either answer the question, or at the end of the webinar, I will look through those. I will ask again, are there any questions that are not answered? I would also say, I'm just going to tell you how I would structure today's is I've got this topic that I wanted to discuss about both personal change in the Bureau of Prisons and also systemic change. My work is on systemic change. I try to change the entire system, but every one of you has a personal situation that is very important to you. And I want you to know what I learn from working with BOP officials at the highest level. I want you to see what changes you can expect in the years to come. There are a lot of changes today that did not exist a year ago, many more, much bigger changes that didn't exist 5 years ago. But I'm a person that is advocating for change 2 years from now, 3 years from now. And one of the reasons that I go into prisons is I want people to understand the role that every person has in bringing these changes. And right now, the changes that I am really advocating for are certainly possible. And I don't want you to I never want anybody to take my word for it. Everything I say, you can back up by simply looking at, public comments. And we're going to talk about that today, because if you're going into this system, you've got to be thinking about, okay, the future, what's coming, what can I do today to position myself for the best possible outcome. And for somebody who's kind of new in the system, there's probably a lot you don't understand. And I want you to understand that there's a lot of changes. In fact, I will share this screen with you right now. Okay. And you can see my Zoom screen or Google Chrome screen. I want to go to this section right here and just go to the BOP's website. And you could look on the homepage today. BOP announces new mission, vision, and core values. Now, I want you to know this is from the Wardens Conference that just happened in Colorado 2 days ago. I was supposed to be a keynote speaker at that event, but I had to go speak inside of prisons. I'd already had commitments, so I couldn't go to this thing. I want you to be thinking about what you're reading here from the director. You should watch this video. That's the director of the Bureau of Prisons. And if you scroll down this page, you're going to see about kind of her new missions: corrections professionals who foster a humane and secure environment and ensure public safety by preparing individuals for successful reentry into our communities. That is a very, very different mission from what existed before she was director. It doesn't mean she puts that on paper and it gets implemented this afternoon. I need people to understand why, and I'll be talking about that today. Okay. New vision statement: our highly skilled, diverse, and innovative workforce creates a let's see what happened here. I just heard that my audio
have you
cut
back
out.
now. You're good.
It is, huh? I'm sorry. I don't know what we're going to switch next week to using Google Meets, by the way, because I've had so many problems with Zoom, but we're still recording and I hope it's recorded. Did you see that, Scott? Did everybody see the statements that I was making about from the Wardens Conference this week?
We did. We got past the vision and humane environment part, and we were just starting the second part before we lost your audio.
Okay. Well, I would somebody I saw asked for the link, and so I'm putting it in the chat right now. Just go to www.bop.gov, and if you haven't been there before, I would encourage you to look at that frequently. But you could also get a lot of information just from us. I want you to know that in the past, the Bureau of Prisons mission was only security of the institution, and it's important to understand why. Okay, it's important to understand mandates. The mandate, when a federal judge sentences somebody, that federal judge sentences somebody to the custody of the Attorney General. Okay, and the Bureau of Prisons, it reports to the Attorney General. If you understand that everybody in the Bureau of Prisons, they work for the Attorney General, they're effectively looking at their job as carrying out the will of the judge. Now, we as human beings, we want them to carry out our will. We want them to look at us and want to help us. But that to have that mindset is not a mindset that's going to lead to success. Okay. It's not going to lead you to the outcome that you want. And I want you to get the outcome, the best possible outcome given the situation. And that means people going into the system have to focus on, systemic, personal change on what they can do to change their life and put them in the best possible position while we work to try and change it systemically. And I'm going to talk about that today, because there's a big difference. And just like I don't know how hard any of you are working to get the best possible outcome in your life, I know that nobody on this webinar knows how hard I have to work to try and bring this systemic change and the resistance I face. And it is enormous resistance. It became more clear than ever when I was on this last week's federal prison tour, because I was supposed to be at this Wardens Conference and I couldn't go, but I'm interacting with high-level executive staff, but not wardens, because the wardens were all at this conference. So I'm there with staff that it would include unit managers and associate wardens and reentry coordinators and psychology departments and supervisors of education. And it's important to remember, not everybody in the system is a proponent of changes for which I'm advocating. I'm very clear about what I'm advocating for. I would like to see all prison camps close. If a judge or the Bureau of Prisons says you can go to a prison camp, but you have a job and a place to live, in my view, you should be at home and working and with your family and paying taxes. And some people might say, that's ridiculous. That will never happen in the Bureau of Prisons. Well, I used to hear that when we were advocating for incentives that now exist as a law in the First Step Act. These are very, very long tail changes, but none of those changes will happen if I can't build a record showing more people are building release plans. More people are building a pathway to demonstrate they're ready to be a good neighbor. More people are building a pathway showing that they are the kind of people that can function in society. And that was the topic of this Wardens Conference this week. But remember, the Bureau of Prisons is a 35,000, 40,000 person bureaucracy. And for the past 40 years or 30 plus years, the mantra of that bureaucracy has not been to be concerned about your life when you come home. Now it is. But everybody in the Bureau is not a proponent of that. I was with people last week who, and I won't say names or locations even, but I got attacked by when I was talking about the importance of people building a pathway that make them a better candidate for an earlier release. And somebody in a position of authority said, I think that what you're doing is a disservice to America. If a judge sentences somebody to prison, my job, in my view, is to keep them incarcerated all the way through that journey. I don't even like good time, she told me. She can't get past the fact that I did 26 years in prison and certainly does not think I should be advocating for change. But she has power in her institution. It will take a long time for this data to come down. And these mandates to come down from the director's office, the regional director's office, to the wardens, and then from the wardens to everybody in the institution. So that means every person who's going into the system has to be thinking about this today. When she was talking with me, because there's a big movement right now in the Bureau of Prisons for release plans. And when she was talking with me about release plans, she said, I don't even care about somebody's release plan. She said, I care about the victim of the crime. That's the only person I care about. And it's very difficult to argue with somebody on that front. It's going to have to come from the top. But for me to change the people at the top, I've also got to change the people from the bottom. It is a very complicated, heavy lift. And I told her, you might not care, but I've interviewed federal judges who do care, and they're on video. And I've interviewed chiefs of probation, and they do care. And whether you let somebody go to home confinement or not, you're effectively telling people, I want you to follow the law, but I'm not going to follow the law, because the law in the First Step Back is very clear. They're supposed to get 15 days of earned time credits if they do these things. They're supposed to qualify for more home confinement. And there are more legislative changes that they can make in the Bureau of Prisons, as is published in a document called the Code of Federal Regulations, which is a higher authority than Bureau of Prisons policies. So when they ask me in prisons, what is my goal? Well, my goal, of course, is to improve the culture of the Bureau of Prisons, because if I do that, it makes it easier for the warden to get his 500, 600 staff members to start changing their ways. But there's resistance from the union too. right? This is a very complicated shift because the union doesn't want these changes. Then there is a complication with the individuals that have been there. Like her argument with me is, I've been with the Bureau of Prisons for 24 years, and I think these changes that you are having a role in making are very bad for our country. And I said, well, you've been with the Bureau for 24 years. That's a problem, because you don't know what existed 35 years ago, which is when I went into the system, or whatever year it was that I went into. When I went into the system, there was a U.S. Parole Commission. And the U.S. Parole Commission meant, if you have let's just say you have a 6-year sentence, you're going to be judged again after 2 years and potentially go back home. That was the will of Congress, and Congress abolished that. But that's one of the big things we're advocating for right now. We have to do that in a methodical way. And that methodical way, I can tell you, I'm fighting for. I publish a lot about it. But I need people who are on this program and are on this team to understand, how can you advocate for yourself in this really difficult climate? And I'm going to just go over a few things because it's already 10:20, and then I really want to open it up for questions, because I don't serve anybody. Nobody on our team serves anybody if we try and tell you, oh, this is a super simple process. If we let people know, oh, the Bureau of Prisons is, it's going to be easy. We can prepare you for everything. The one thing I have to prepare everybody for is be ready to be uncomfortable and figure out a pathway to succeed anyway. Please, it's super important to think about that. Figure out what can you do to prevail in the face of severe headwinds that you're going to face. And that is what I want to talk about in just, 11 points. And for those of you who have heard me talk about it before, forgive me for being redundant, but I want you to be thinking about it. Number one, you have to be the CEO of your journey. Nobody else can do this for you. Your lawyer cannot do this for you. You have to be the CEO of your journey. You've got to be figuring out, what does success look like for you given the situation you're in? Every person would love to turn the clock back 5 years or 10 years and never be in this situation. But we can't do that. So we have to be thinking about, okay, I'm in this situation. I've got a problem. What can I do to get the best outcome given this problem? And that means, okay, I've got to be the CEO of my journey. I got to have a plan. That's your release plan. I've got to know what priorities to put in place. What do I need to do today, given the situation I'm in? And then how am I going to build my tools, tactics, and resources to execute this plan when I face these very obstructive, bureaucratic people who believe their mandate is to obstruct you? Scott, Seek, could you unmute yourself? Because you just came home, right? Scott, you just came home relatively soon from a relatively uncomfortable experience in a federal prison, correct?
Yes, sir. 36-month sentence. I spent 15 months. I'm out on home confinement as a result of First Step Back.
Yeah.
Really what it goes down to.
And that I would consider that to be an extraordinarily successful outcome. To have a 36-month sentence and get out in 15, that's a success, in my view, based on my experience. How do you feel about that?
Well, I probably should have been home about 4 months sooner, based on every CARES Act, First Step Act. But because the First Step Act rollout of days and credits and auto calcs kept fouling up what's called a PRD date, your projected release date, every time my PRD date would change 36 months out, okay, it meant that my CARES application had to keep being refiled. So essentially updated, but that meant refiling. So as a result of all of the wonderful First Step auto calc changes coming down the pike, which is a question I want to come back to you on. It probably cost me 4 extra months in Coleman, in Florida.
So I want to address that matter right there, because what Scott's just describing for us is, although Congress passes a law and the president signs it, it doesn't mean that everybody in the Bureau of Prisons is going to execute on that model right away. There's going to be a need for self-advocacy. There's going to be a need for outside advocacy. And there's going to be a need to have continuing to put pressure. I know when that program was coming out, how much resistance there was in the Bureau of Prisons to even getting to that point where they would recognize the first assessment and the second assessment qualifying for 15 days. It was a heavy lift. I hired the former director of the Bureau of Prisons to ask him, how would you do it? And we went through it, but then he had to work behind the scenes to go and tell his former colleagues why this was the right way to do it. And it was the will of Congress. That's a victory that you're home, but it doesn't assuage the fact that you spent 4 extra months. One thing I can tell everybody on this webinar, there are going to be people that go to prison 3 years from now that are going to get benefits that you are not going to get, because this advocacy takes a long time. I'm going to fight for it. I hope all the changes happen today, but in all reality, I every time I go into a prison, I'm in an adversarial situation. And in that adversarial situation, it's just, I have to push through it to keep this ball moving. And I want you to push through it, not in terms of fighting the system, because there's a time for you to fight the system. It's not when you're going into it. It's when you come out, right? When you're going into it, the number one goal is to get out as soon as you possibly can, with your dignity intact and with opportunities to prosper. And that release plan is a very important tool to help you navigate, but also to help you with case managers you're going to meet, to help you with unit managers you're going to meet, to help you with people you will never meet, to help you with the halfway house that might not allow you to go home, but require you to stay in a halfway house or work in a job you don't want to work in, your probation officer that might oversee your supervised release. There's so many complexities that if you don't think about them today, you're not going to be as strong as if you do. So I really want you to be thinking about being the CEO of your journey. And of course, in that role, you've got to think about the headwinds. And there are a lot of headwinds. We can help you understand them. I'm going to work hard to change them. Our team will work with you on personal levels, but you definitely have to understand the journey ahead. And I want you to anticipate obstacles like Scott just described. He should have been home 4 months ago. I would say, Scott, is that your opinion, or is that the law? Because there are many people that should have been home from their opinion. There are others that the law says you should have been home. Would you agree it was the law in your case?
I would say in my case, the law, but the law isn't necessarily, I use this term all the time, especially with people getting ready to go in. They don't care. Your case managers, your unit managers, if you're at a camp, your camp administrators, your counselors, everybody that's on it, they do not care. You have to self-advocate day in and day out without being a royal pain in the ass. Bottom line, you have to be under the radar all day long, shiny nose, not brown nose, just nice and clean, and advocate for yourself. If you believe the law is, you are entitled to, in my case, Michael will attest to this, I was convinced that the interpretation of 10 or 15 days as a minimum or a low should have occurred at or around the 7th month, but the BOP wasn't awarding it until month 13. That was just changed in the past month or two. Now they consider the first meeting with your case manager in the first 30 days as a risk assessment meeting, followed 6 months later by a second one. Thereby,
That was definitely the law. It just took a lot of advocacy to push it. And
I think, and
Scott,
I
were
give-
you the
I
guy
give-
that I said, were you, and I don't, because there's so many people on that write to me from prison. I don't know if that was you. Was that you that said, yeah, you say it's the law, but it's not happening here? And then eventually did happen there. I want you guys to know that's going to continue. That will continue. There will be things that you're saying, I don't see any changes, but I see things. And what Scott just said, you know, he just got out a month and he says, nobody cares. Well, that's true at a local level because it's a bureaucracy and there is a union. But at a higher level, I am telling you, it does care. And I'm going to tell you some evidence of that. I'm going to have probably the hardest training day of my life on May the 10th, because I have to go to a federal prison where people from USP Terre Haute, staff members from USP Terre Haute, USP Marion, USP, I think Florence, and are all going to meet at a federal prison in Greenville for 8 hours. And I got to lead a whole day seminar on what's changing with the First Step Act, what can change. I want you to realize that is a massive change. To have somebody that did 26 years in prison, for those of you who don't know, I was in prison for 26 years, to become a contractor to the Bureau of Prisons and to go and train staff why this is important, that is a change. It doesn't mean I'm going to turn their lights on that minute and get them all saying, oh, yes, we need to start helping people get out. But it is a change, and it will move, but it may take me years to make a bigger impact. All I can promise you, I will not stop this kind of ongoing ministry of changing the system. But I also need people inside doing their part, because if we go in there thinking that we're entitled to something, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. You're going to face more resistance and more obstruction. There's a process to litigate for yourself and advocate for yourself. And I'm creating resources to teach people how to do it. I always say I would never ask anybody to do anything that I didn't do when I was in prison. I had to become a master of learning how to use those advocacy techniques, but they include many factors, right? It's going to include letter writing campaigns. It's going to include administrative remedy campaigns. It's going to require you to understand the Prison Litigation Reform Act. It's going to require you to do things that your lawyer cannot do for you, and that I frankly cannot do for you. What I can do is show you how to navigate a storm. And that's what our team, I hope, will help assist along the ways, including hiring former BOP people to assist us with this effort, producing more information that we can have influence at the Bureau of Prisons at the highest level. But all of this is like a big ecosystem, and every individual is a part of that. And at the end of my little prepared remarks, I'm going to give you some suggestions to think about. So it's very important to remember community perceptions, right? When it says United States of America versus Michael Santos, I know that is a challenge that I have to overcome. And it's a challenge that everybody in our community has to start building a pathway. I'm really impressed with Cheryl's husband, who was already a super well-educated man, but even before he got to the Bureau of Prisons, he began enrolling to get his master's degree, and it is building something that he will be able to use as an asset when he's confronting these very obstructive people. That's something I learned while I was incarcerated, is that you've got to find a way to stand out. Because in this system, when you're coming into this system, I was 163777004. And in many ways, I will always be 163777004. That was my prison registration number. So, but the more you think about that, the more you can start architecting a plan, a release plan that will help you move. And what exists today, please remember, it's got to iterate. It's got to grow. It's got to be comprehensive from the start, but 6 months later, it's got to be more comprehensive because you're making a sale, the sale of your life to a group of very, very cynical people. The more you think about that at every stage of the journey, I think the better you're going to become. And I also want you to think about family challenges. You know, it's not only you that's going through this, it's your whole family, your wife, your husband, your children. This is a life-changing event, and you're going to need to support them and help them understand how to help you. They can be extraordinarily effective in your advocacy campaign, much more so than your lawyer is going to be. But it's very important to help everybody understand, what am I going to fight for? What are going to be the areas that I choose to advocate for? It depends what stage of the journey you're in. If you're on the stage of pre-trial, well, that's one kind of advocacy campaign. If you're before your pre-sentence investigation report, that's one kind of advocacy campaign. If you're not been sentenced yet, that's another kind of advocacy campaign. If you're going into the system, another kind of advocacy campaign. If you're in the system and they are somehow impinging or infringing upon your rights, that's another kind of advocacy campaign. If you're working to get out of prison because you're entitled to get out of prison, another kind of advocacy campaign. If you're looking to recalibrate your life after going through this system, again, another kind of advocacy campaign. And your family is a very big part of that. So we always offer, resources that we hope you will use, but you've got to want to learn and develop your understanding of this. So one of the things that we like to give away to everybody in our community is either an audio book or a soft cover book of Earning Freedom, because that book is going to show you all the obstacles that are coming. And if you understand the obstacles or how I got around them, you're going to say, okay, how do I sow seeds today for what's coming later? And that's super important, to be thinking about the strengths that you have in your personal case, but also think about the weaknesses. Think about the opportunities that are open for you, but also think about the threats. And this is where I'm going to come to kind of the end of my prepared remarks before I start responding to questions. And I see Sir Hot, Kurt, and Larry have a hand up, and I'll respond to them. And that's really when we become the most effective, I think, is responding to questions. So when you're going into this system, I've spoken about this before. It's a sociological theory that I used to use in some of my writings called Johari's window. And it's asking you, when you're confronting this situation, I want you to think about this it's kind of a quadrant about when you're facing decisions, right? You need to think about things that are openly transparent, everything that's known to you and known to others, right? What is that? For some people, it might be, well, you're going to prison and everybody else knows you're going to prison. That's just a fact, right? A judge sentenced you. You know that. Everybody else knows that. Then there's a second part of the quadrant, and he called this a closed quadrant. Things that are known to you, but not known to others. Well, you want to prepare for success. But there are a lot of other people in this system that have enormous power over your life that they don't really know that. Not only do they not know it, they don't give a crap, okay? They just don't care. So you have to think about these people and say, okay, how am I going to convert those adversaries into my advocates? And the more I can think about that, the stronger I become in architecting a plan. So remember, some things known to you, some things known to others. Some things are known to you, but not known to others. You want to prepare for success. Others don't know that you genuinely want to prepare for success. In their eyes, You just want to manipulate the system. So let's understand that and figure out, how am I going to overcome it? 3, some things are going to be known to others, but not known to you. You don't know, for example, what exists in your file. You have no idea what an investigator may have populated your prison file with, what a prosecutor may have gotten your what gotten information into your file. You don't know these things. But there may be factors once you get into prison that even the Bureau of Prisons is entering data and information into a file that everybody in the BOP is going to know, but you're not going to know. So I need you to remember that and think about that. And then finally, there are things that are that the social scientists would say would be blind. It's unknown to you and unknown to others. What does your future look like? You don't know. I don't know. The BOP doesn't know, but you got to think about this and take this into your plan. How will your decisions today influence your prospects for success tomorrow? You don't know. I don't know. But if you're not thinking about these things, you're not as strong as you could be. And it's super important for you to develop confidence and strength as you confront these challenges ahead. We don't have this guy working for us anymore, but one of the parts of our ecosystem, for those of you who don't know, is we provide jobs for formerly incarcerated people, and it's always part of a bridge to help people get back on their feet. And I remember hiring one guy who was a surgeon, and you just think about all the complications that somebody has to go through when they're to become a surgeon. All right. I mean, he had to do well in high school. He had to do well in college. He had to get into the right medical school. He had to persuade other teaching institutions to give him an internship or a fellowship. And this guy did it, but then he got in trouble, and he's young. He was like 50, 48, 50. I'm 59, so 48 or 50 is super young. But he decided he made some decision that sent him to prison. He got out of prison, like Scott got out of prison, but he had like 8 months or something to do in a halfway house. And the only way he could get out of a halfway house was if he had a job. And you'd think a guy who is so successful in overcoming med school and surgical training and all that kind of stuff, you'd think that guy wouldn't have a problem getting a job. But when you're 50 and you're a felon, you got to realize the job market may not be friendly to you, because an employer is not going to want to hire somebody that they're going to train and invest resources in, and they know he's going to leave at a certain time. But this guy couldn't believe it. So he's in the halfway house. The only way he can go home is to get a job. And he thought it wouldn't be a problem. It took 2 months and he couldn't find a job. Finally, the case manager in the halfway house said to him, well, the only job I can get for you is a clerk at a 7-Eleven. And he said, I'll take it, just so that he could go home. And he took the job. It was right across the street from the hospital where he was the surgeon in the emergency room. I mean, the humiliation of that is overwhelming. And after he finished with the BOP, he still couldn't get a job. His probation officer would not allow him to leave that job until he went to the next job. And that job, before he came to work with us, was moving around fertilizer at Home Depot. It's a former surgeon. What is my message to you? He's not thinking about the great story ahead, the great challenges ahead. That's what your release plan has to do. You've got to take every obstacle into consideration. What's coming? How am I going to overcome this? What will my banks fire me and tell me to get my money get your money out of their account? Will business people do business with you when they're Googling and they're seeing some type of derogatory information about your life? If you don't have a plan for that, one thing I can promise you, the system has a plan for you. And our job, to do our job effectively, is to not only help you see, oh, everything is going to be successful, everything is going to be super sweet. No, this is a fight. We cannot change the past, but what we can do is architect a pathway to a better outcome. And that's what I wanted to share with you this morning. I need all of you to be focusing on your personal plan for change, dealing with the headwinds. You know, you're going into stormy seas. Let's make sure we get the best outcome while going through those stormy seas. And I'm going to work on the systemic changes. And that's the way we collaborate together. You know, we've got a great team that I'm super proud of. And maybe on the other end of this journey, you'll consider joining our team and helping our advocacy efforts. But right now, if you're going in, my hopes are that you are doing everything possible to sow seeds for a better future. And with those were my prepared remarks. It's already 10:45 or 10:47 here. I just want you to know we are committed to staying with you for as long as it takes. So I'm going to go to Mr. Serhat Kurt and ask you to unmute yourself because you were the first hand up, and I'll be very happy to respond to your question.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I have to say first, you look much younger than your age, much younger.
Yeah, prison can preserve you. I haven't had a drink, so I'm scared of having a drink because I'm too afraid of doing anything that might bring me back into that wretched system. But tell me, Mr. Kurt, how can I help you?
My brother is in prison in Milan. I think you were there too.
I was there last week.
Last week. And we just purchased the release book from Amazon yesterday, which is excellent. It's so much help.
I want you to know that's an iterative approach as well. Like I wrote that book after a meeting with the Bureau of Prisons and hearing, hey, this is going to be important for these new incentives I'm advocating for. Now they've asked me to create an entire course to go into the Bureau. So I will be developing that after I get back from my next prison tour, which is going to Leavenworth and Kansas. So that's a big summer project for me. I do hope that your brother takes it seriously. And even though, I mean, he has a great team at Milan. I met the warden there. Actually, he just got promoted to the central office. And I hope that I can do some great advocacy work with him. How's your brother doing?
He's doing okay. The one question he has is, you know, he is applying RDEP and he's Turkish citizen. He wants to maybe transfer to Turkey. Then he wants to apply to compassionate release. He wants to know, can he apply all of them at once?
Well,
because
hold on. You've raised some very big questions. Did you say he's from Turkey?
He's US and double citizenship, US and Turkey, yes.
Oh, okay. So he's got US citizenship.
Yes.
RDAP, if he qualifies for RDAP, he should definitely take RDAP because that's the one program that could guarantee a year off of his. How long is his sentence?
His sentence is 8 years. But
So RDAP is a home run for him. Should definitely do RDAP if he qualifies. Compassionate release is very specific. Why? On what grounds would he be asking for compassionate release?
His wife, medical issues.
That's a very good reason. And that's a reason that the Sentencing Commission just wrote about in early March. I published about that, and I'll be very happy to write about that. But yes, if a person has a change in circumstances with the family, that is one of the reasons that the Sentencing Commission recommends for compassionate release. How long has he been in prison?
Almost 3 years now.
I would say that's a valid thing to advocate toward. What was the third?
Transfer to, can he apply all of them? Because some people told him if he apply compassionate release, the RDAP application will be rejected or his transfer.
Oh, so he's not in RDAP yet?
He's not in RDAP yet, no.
Well, I mean, if it were me, if you're asking me without knowing any complexities of his case, I would probably do the compassionate release first because you said he's got 8 years and he's only been in 3. And is he even qualified to get into the program now?
You mean RDAP?
Yes.
There are some doctor letters. We will get it.
No, I don't mean that. I mean, because they let you into RDAP based on your release date. Is his release date of sufficient? And I know Milan's a low, so it's a little different from a camp.
His release date is 2027.
And it's only 2023. He probably won't get into RDEP for at least a year, correct?
Yes, yeah. He
Yeah,
says
I would go for the compassionate release, because you're going to hear an answer on that within a year.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
but I would not try that and simultaneously the transfer to Turkey, because it almost undermines it. I need to be here to take care of my wife, but I also want to transfer to Turkey. You don't want to have competing arguments that make one weaker.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know that he's a great candidate to get extradited, given that he's got U.S. citizenship. That's my belief. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. That's just, you're asking me. That's what I would say. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's answered. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank you.
Larry, could you unmute yourself and introduce yourself and tell us how we can help?
Yeah, thank you, Michael Santos. As always, you're always inspirational. I've been incarcerated just as long as you have. In fact, I just paroled about 7 months ago, off of a 25 to life sentence in
Wait a minute.
California.
Wait a minute. You paroled? So you're not in the federal system?
No, I paroled from California prison system, but I'm very familiar with you and your teachings. A lot of prisoners in California watch your videos. I was amongst those sitting in Stockton on lockdown during COVID-19. I was at the bottom and I was depressed, and I felt like, why even try anymore? But, you know, seeing inspiring videos like yours kept me on the right path, because we weren't programming. We were locked in cages for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was awful. I mean, I saw people go mad, cover themselves with their own feces. I mean, it was horrible. Like,
Larry,
I saw people
Larry, I'd like to, I mean, I would really like to speak with you separately and record your video. You're the kind of story, I think, not so much about my courses that are in prisons, but a story of somebody who's been able to overcome and triumph over that kind of struggle. It bears a lot more attention than I can give you on this call right here. So
Yes.
if you're available, would you send me, do you know how to connect with me?
I got the email from, I don't know, some guy named John, but if you give me your information, I could do that. I could give you my email.
No, I'll just put it in the chat. How do I do it? Scott, could you give him my email, or somebody Justin or somebody on there, give
Sure,
Larry
I
my
can do that.
email? I mean, I'm super simple. It's michael@michaelsantos.com. So it's not terribly, yeah, send me an email. And if you're willing to do a video with us that we could take into prisons, this is the kind of thing that we would build a course on and show the prison system why we're making a difference. I'll explain that based on that, Larry. And did you have a question for me, or were we just going to talk?
No, I had a question.
Let me answer your question, and then I would like members of our community to understand why this message is salient. In fact, I'll say it first, Larry, if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So to bring reforms, right, in the prison system, we really need to have a deliberate plan. And that deliberate plan, I will never ask anybody to do anything I'm not doing. It's very comprehensive. I learned this from Viktor Frankl and Nelson Mandela and Frederick Douglass and so many other leaders who went through struggle. To change a system, we first have to create a mechanism to collect data. Larry is an example of that. I've never spoken with Larry before. I've never met him. I don't know who he is. I don't know anything about Larry, but I know he was inside of a prison, and what he said was courses that we offer, our team offers and creates at Prison Professors, changed his life. Now I can tell you, I can just show you today, right? Let's see if I can show how I can show. I'll show you, share my screen. This is just today, since I was on this video. What happens? So you'll see this. Yes, you'll see all these things, professional development, right? This is California Department of Corrections, right? They're reaching out to me and saying, hey, will you be available for professional development training for California Department of Corrections? That goes to what Scott's message was about nobody cares, right? They're asking, what had to happen? First, I have to influence hundreds of thousands of people in prison that I'll never meet and say, hey, here's the pathway to success. Then by doing that, then the administrators in the prison say, oh, this is a good program. This helps us get what we want, right? Zig Ziglar, he said, if you can help other people get what they want, we can get everything we want. So first of all, influence people in prison. That influences administrators. Then administrators become advocates for change. And that's what we get used to change laws in Congress or change policies. Very heavy lift. But if we collect data, right, we can really move the needle. So what do I mean by that? If I take 100 people in one category and they didn't go through our programs and they have recidivism rates of 70%, okay? And you take 100 people that do go through our programs and they have recidivism rates of 0. We save taxpayers money. And that is the only way we overcome the challenge. So what are we doing to that? Well, we just hired a new researcher at UCLA to do the data, collect the data from stories like Larry. So it is a very, very big lift, and all of you are a part of it. That's why we're super grateful that you're part of our community. You allow us to continue our ministry of advocacy to change this system. Larry, what was your question?
Well, I mean, while I was incarcerated, I wanted to help prisoners, and I wanted to show them how to become found suitable for parole in California. So I wrote a book. However, I don't know how to put it into a format to publish it, and I'm like having difficulties with that because I've been gone for 2 decades.
That's a very, very long question. That's what we're going to have a private one-on-one call with, and I'm going to record it, because the only way I can take time to answer a question like that is if I can use that story to influence 100,000 people in prison. So
That's what I want to do.
Good.
Yeah.
Send me the information, and then you could ask me and we'll actually teach that course. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. Is there somebody else that has a question that I or a member of our team can answer for you? And just unmute yourself. If not, I'll go through the chat room, but somebody could just raise their hand or unmute themselves so that we can, is that Scott? Go ahead, Scott.
There we go. I'm going to come back to the same question I've kind of been fielding with you and God, escaping me, in the past week or two since getting out. There have been no updates on the BOP site for FSA day credits. That goes back to the last date change for me was noted, I want to say sometime in February. So while I was still at Coleman in March, nothing is showing. I mean, I know what I'm supposed to have, but the BOP.
March. So we're only talking about April. Is that right?
Well, okay, let me take a step back. FSA credits are awarded typically within the first 10 days for the previous month. So, and that's the way it was in January. And then there was another update in February, but there's been no update for the month of March, which would have been April 10th, 15th. And no chatter anywhere as to why the PRD dates across the board have not been updated through the auto calc.
I can only tell you what I heard when I was in a prison, actually in Yankton, and they told me that yes, that getting them updated, and that was in, I don't know if that was February or March, but they'd said that they had received this memo that everybody was going to be updated supposed to be by the second Saturday, but then they said it was going to be by the third because it was going to be such a big change. And it wasn't done until the fourth Saturday of that month. And that was the one you're describing.
Right.
If it has not been updated since then, my guess is that is because of a technological algorithm problem they're having, but it will happen. What is your anticipated outdate, Scott?
BOP says it's January of 24, January 28th of 24. My calculations would put me at mid-October of 23, based on earned FSA credits, even while at home confinement doing.
Let's do it this way. Let's try it this way. Justin's on here, I see right now. Welcome back, Justin. Maybe Justin can do another video. We'll hire a former BOP guy, Gustin, who we've hired before. And why don't you see if John can do some sleuthing with his former colleagues at the BOP and say, what's going on with that auto calculation? And you can report on that by next week's webinar, because I'm going to be gone.
Yeah.
Could you do that, Justin?
I can do that. I'm in contact with John on other matters. I will. And while I'm speaking for a moment, someone watched a video where a lot of people on this webinar regret how they prepared for the probation interview, and then they learn about the relevance of it in prison. And someone heard a video where you said, if the PSR isn't what you like, perhaps the judge can make an amendment to the judgment and commitment order. And the person says the JNC is important as the probation report. What's the
It's not the
difference? So
JNC,
could you
it's the
touch-
statement of reasons.
Can you touch on that for a minute? Because there's a lot of people freaked out that it's like, I didn't prepare for the probation interview. Like, what do I do? And what is this JNC and reason? Can you just help people understand the importance of, I'd like you to touch on that because it comes up every day.
For sure. And I've written about it, but I perhaps we need to update it. I'm going to refer to a U.S. Sentencing Commission statement on the importance of the statement of reasons. So there's when the Bureau of Prisons is assessing somebody, they use a couple of documents. They use a pre-sentence investigation report, which outlines the conviction. They use a document called, as Justin just described, a judgment order, which is really very basic. It just gives the numbers and the like the length, the months, and this fine, and the standard conditions of supervised release, and any special conditions of supervised release. But there's a third document that's called the judge's statement of reasons, and this is required by law. So every time a judge imposes a sentence, he also prepares what's called a statement of reasons. A person can work to influence that statement of reasons. And it's also important to remember that a judge has discretion over a person's case for a relatively limited amount of time. After the date of sentencing, I think the judge it's either 10 days or 2 weeks that the judge can amend the order. He's probably not going to change the sentence, but he may change the statement of reasons if something is not fully developed. That's that area where I was speaking with, I forgot the fellow's name, the psychologist that was on before we started the webinar. And I was suggesting to him, in the statement of reasons, he wants the judge to ask the Bureau of Prisons for something or give a reason for what he wants. To the extent the person succeeds in getting that done, he's stronger. So you've got to, it's every individual's responsibility to understand how these documents are going to influence the rest of your life. Certainly your journey through the system. If you don't understand them, then you're not as strong as if you do. Because if you could somehow influence what's in that statement of reasons, when it comes time to advocate for yourself later, you can refer to that document and the unit team will have to review it. Maybe not at the local level, but if you have to appeal this to the region or to the central office, that will prove very helpful, because nobody's going to want to go against a judge's direct orders. Does that make sense, Justin? Does that respond to your question?
It does. That's very, very helpful. Thank you.
I'll write a blog that references the statement of reasons and provides the authority for anybody who wants to show it to their lawyer. Okay. And was I responding to somebody's question, or was that just a conversation with you, Jess? I think that I was responding to Scott's question, asking you to reach out to John and find out if we can get some inside information on what the Bureau's doing. And then you asked me that question. So could I go to the other people who have their hands up?
I want to ask one more question before you turn it to questions about compassionate release, because there are several people on this call who are texting and calling me. Okay. They've been sentenced. They're getting ready to go to prison. They Google and they find some very inspiring stories. People who had a 200-year sentence was released after 20 years. And one person said, if you got out after 20 years on a 200-year sentence, if I got a 10-year sentence, what do I have to do to get released after a year, 5 years and 6 months? So it's trying to manage expectations about, how quickly someone should even try. What is extraordinary and compelling? I know we've done those webinars. We could write and talk for days on it. But if someone's going to surrender to prison and then immediately file for a compassionate release, I want you to cover that.
Let's not only think about compassionate release. Let's think about the best possible outcome, right? Show of hands, like just raise the hand. Let's do a little survey here. How many people think the best cheeseburger they ever had in the world came from McDonald's? No hands are going up. Isn't that something? No hands. But can anybody think of any restaurant that sold more hamburgers than McDonald's? Why is that? Because McDonald's is extraordinary and compelling in marketing their hamburgers. Okay. You've got to be extraordinary and compelling in developing your story. That release plan that you build is going to be way more influential than anything your lawyer does. A compassionate release thing has to be very specific. There's got to be something happening that the judge did not take into consideration at the time that the judge imposed sentencing. Sadly, the commission has expressly stated that it cannot only be post-conviction behavior. That can be a component together with something else. So the people who got compassionate release, it's because they have a judge that effectively wants to let them out. And the judge has the authority to do it if the person is phenomenal, right? Phenomenal. And we feature in our courses, many people who've gotten it, not only Adam, the 200-year guy, but many, many other people. And the whole key is a person has to be kind of thinking about this very early to architect the plan. And I think you'll find that in the book, Earning Freedom, like examples of it. I think you'll see it in all of the free content we make available at prisonprofessors.com. If you want to talk with Scott or Justin or anybody else on our team about examples, it's kind of like I would look at it like this. You're going into an area that you may not understand, and you might want to hire a feasibility architect. Okay, what can I do? What are my options? And you got to take all those things: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. You got to take in, okay, how do I look at it? How is the other people going to look at it? What can I do? The more I architect that, the better off you're going to be. But remember where you're going. There's no magic pill here. Okay. If a federal judge imposes a sentence, you've got to have the great mitigation strategy at the right time. And the earlier, the better. It's never too early. It's never too late. But you've got to be thinking, okay, where am I right now? What can I do? And it doesn't matter. If it's somebody who was looking at 10 years and the judge gave him 6, victory. But that doesn't mean the guy should stop mitigating, right? The guy should still work to mitigate and work to get something better. And that's what I hope they will learn from participating in our community. And we'll certainly work to try and deliver ideas and strategies. All of that is the reason that we go into prisons, is to spread that news and change the system. Justin, can I go to the questions now?
Yes, let me just, okay, I'll discuss it next week on the webinar, something that you said. Yeah, please continue.
Home folder.
Yes, good morning, Michael, and thank you for all you do. I really appreciate the opportunity to ask you a quick question. So I'm preparing for sentencing here in the next couple of months, and we'll be submitting my character reference letters along with my personal narrative. My question is, should I also submit a letter to the judge, personally from me to the judge, which is in essence a duplicate or similar to the personal narrative, or will the personal narrative be sufficient?
Well, remember what I just said about different stages of the mitigation arc. I'm going to give you my view, which I'm predicated on not only working with thousands of people, but also interviewing at least 20 federal judges, 2 of whom had the courage to get on our webinar. Mitigation, it's got to come in different stages. To do your narrative, that is an important strategy at the pre-sentence investigation stage, because you want to influence that document. The character reference letters is a strategy that I would say is really about the sentencing hearing, because now you've said what you've learned, you've said what you've identified with victims, you've said things. Your character reference letters are going to be people who theoretically know you better and than the judge knows you or the prosecutor knows, and they're validating you, right? They're talking about they believe in you. And so that's a stage there. There are other strategies that you might consider doing at that sentencing stage. Then there's going to be strategies you need to be thinking about when you go into the prison system, like, going to school or building a support system or developing a comprehensive release plan or teaching. I mean, there's no limit to what you can do except your own creativity. And you've got to be creative, and you've got to recognize where you are. You've got to recognize you are going to face people who want to hurt you, who want to make it harder on you. And you got to succeed anyway. That's why it's such a complex labyrinth to weave your way through. But I hope through our community, you will find examples of how other people have done it. If you talk to Justin or Scott, I think you'll find some other examples. If you read Earning Freedom or any of the other literature, you'll see how I did it. But this is not something that somebody else can do. We can help you architect it, but it's about executing. And I hope that is responsive to your question, Mr. Homefolder.
Okay, so again, this is why I'm asking the question. I believe that my personal narrative speaks to all stakeholders. There's several audience members there, the probation.
But it's at one stage. Remember that. Remember that it's one stage, and you want to have an iterative approach. You don't want to give everything away at the one stage so that you can't do anything more. Because if you speak to everything and do everything once, there's nothing that you're going to be able to work in your favor later. Because the judge is going to say, well, I want you to look at it this way. You go before sentencing today and you get the best. Right now, let's just say hypothetically, government wants 10 years. You get 5. Okay. That's a victory. I guarantee you 1 year later, you're going to be trying to get that 5 lowered. And if that's the case, what you don't want to have is opposition saying, well, Your Honor, you took all of that into consideration at sentencing. That's the reason you gave him this sentence, right? You've got to keep building it. It can never be done. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, and I understand the iterative step-by-step process that you're referring to. But again, my narrative is going to be speaking to all stakeholders involved, including future case manager, future probation officers. However, a personal letter from me to the judge, which in essence is going to be very similar to my narrative, would that also help in terms of submitting, or there's no need to submit a personal letter if I'm submitting a narrative?
Oh, I would still write a personal letter. Remember, narrative is for the probation officer. That's really what that's for. You're saying it's going to go to the judge. You are trying an innovative way to influence that pre-sentence investigation report. You want the probation officer to write about that in the court. I would still create an allocution type statement for sentencing. And because there's a time lapse, right? The PSR might take place in May. The sentence might take place until July. I hope that your story evolves between May and July, and you can express that to the judge.
Okay, great. So then definitely submit my narrative speaking to all stakeholders, and definitely submit my personal letter to the judge, to an audience of one being the judge. And of course, I will have a well thoughtful and considered allocution to make the statement to the judge. Okay.
I think that advances the ball.
Appreciate the help. Thank you, Michael, for taking my question.
Thank you. I see David Stone. David.
Hello, Michael.
Hi.
I have a couple questions. The first, I want to say thank you for your advocacy work. I've been watching your updates on YouTube anyway, going to all the prisons. And recently I read an article that was talking about the First Step Act applying to more conduct, like to all cases. And it sounded like it was a good thing in the headline, but then the content of the article is like very polarized as far as political, saying that
So
people
you're
shouldn't
seeing
be-
something along the lines of a commentator, another advocacy group, like that's what we do. We advocate. Are you saying
No,
like that's one?
it wasn't an advocacy group. It was just a news source. It was basically saying that they shouldn't expand the First Step Act and various reasons. They didn't want more criminals being released early. Like,
Yeah, that's the
how
typical.
do you address?
How do I address it?
How do you like convince someone
But
otherwise?
we had to convince. I mean, you got to think back. There was a time when I made that first presentation called Incentivizing Excellence in 2015. The thought that anybody would get 15 days off of their sentence was just as absurd and outrageous to many people. Their argument would be, why should we give credit to somebody for doing something they're supposed to do anyway? How do I overcome it? Is I do that, what I just showed you. I said, I'll take 100 people here. You're going to have 75% recidivism rates. Those aren't my figures. Those are the government's figures. Take 100 people here and you reduce that to 0. Is that good for society or bad for society? And that argument wins every time because of the amount of money that is wasted, the human life that is wasted, the intergenerational cycles of recidivism that is wasted. But it's a fight, David, and I just give you my word, I'm going to keep fighting. Is that all your question?
Okay, so my next question is, how can we help you? How can us and my supporters help?
Are you justice impacted person? Are you going into the system, or you have a loved one in the system?
I'm going to surrender soon.
Well, where are you going? Do you know?
Well, no, I haven't received a response about where exactly. In about 3 weeks, I'm hoping it's Sheridan in Oregon.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, we're really getting embedded in the Bureau of Prisons. That's a very big lift for us. We're really embedded. We're in like 30 federal prisons right now and growing. But when you get to your prison, take our stuff with you, guy. We're not in the Western region yet. And you'll see. I mean, what you have to do is focus on David Stone. That's the truth. You've got to focus on you. That's what this webinar was about. Personal change and systemic change. But I guarantee you, how long is your sentence, David?
28 months.
I'll bet you'll see change before you finish that 28 months. I'm very bullish on that.
Well, I sure hope so.
Me too. But just stay out of trouble and focus on your recalibrating and coming back strong with your dignity intact, okay?
Okay.
Good. Thanks. I see Mr. Reyes.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, thanks for all you do. I just signed up for your services with Justin. He's been a great help. I'm here in California. Yeah, I'm here in California, so I'm local. I just got sentenced a few days ago. Anticipated surrender date of 30 to 45 days. I've got sentenced for 7 years, hoping to get out obviously much earlier than that. I've got a question regarding, this is all new to me, and I'm kind of learning the process. I'm kind of confused on this release plan. When do I start it? How do I start it? And how important is it?
If you signed up with Justin, it's super important. But if you signed up with Justin, I mean, I just got back in town. I suspect I'll be hearing this and catching up today after this webinar. I'll reach out to you or somebody on our team will. We'll start it today or tomorrow. Okay.
Okay.
And we'll work through this. I know that this is a very stressful time for you.
Yes.
I just got back from Minnesota. So give me this afternoon and I'll connect with Justin and get scheduling together. But you'll definitely hear from our team today or tomorrow.
Okay. And this release plan, do I submit it prior to going into the Bureau of Prisons or?
No, we'll walk you through all of that too. This is an iterative approach for you.
Okay.
It's going to be used the first time you're presenting it to them is going to be at your unit team, but we'll walk you through all of that.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. Where are you from? You said you're from California. Where?
Northern California district.
Where?
Well, I live in the Bay Area.
I used to live in Petaluma. I live in Orange County now, but I used to live in Petaluma. Where are you?
I'm in a small town called Hollister up in Northern California. It's about an hour from Monterey.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah, I
love
actually,
Monterey.
yeah, I told Justin I used to live in Orange County for a quarter of my life, so I know the area pretty well. I used to
All
live
right.
at the Spectrum for some time, so.
We'll connect later. Thanks so
All
much,
right, thanks,
Robert.
Michael.
All right. JP Maroney.
Hey, Michael, appreciate everything. You had mentioned earlier about the reinvigorated or renewed mission of the BOP director, and I pulled up that speech, so I'll watch that later. I appreciate that. What are you seeing that the new director is doing to drive that message down through all the levels as you were discussing?
Allowing a guy that did 26 years in prison to go into federal prisons and have a forum? That's a big deal, right? That is a very big deal. For anybody who's had, I mean, nobody on our community is going to know this about prison, but this has been a very long tail process. It started, I got out of prison in 2013, started advocating for incentives in prison while I was in prison, started to get a forum when I was a professor at San Francisco, began speaking in law schools when nobody wanted any incentives at all, none, fighting. I mean, people would, I'll give you an example. I remember Justin was with me, right? We were presenting in a prison system, and it was the entire state's prison system. We were presenting to the Secretary of Corrections and his directors. And after making a presentation on why we needed incentives and how more people could emerge successfully, he would said to me, like, you know, I was this dog who learned how to talk, you know, because I'd just gotten out of prison. And he said, how did this happen? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, how did you do 26 years in prison and come back like this? And I said, isn't that ironic? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you're the secretary of the entire prison system. You run the whole prison. There's 20,000 people under your control. And when you see somebody come back strong and ready to function, you don't say what a great job we did in corrections. You kind of ask what went wrong, because you're used to prisons producing failure. And that's why we need to work together. And that's what, you know, we started working in that prison, and we would take data we got from that prison to advance the ball and advance the ball. And I could use that when I was speaking to federal judges and legislators or policymakers. And I would say, you know, that's why it was always called incentivizing excellence. It was saying, you know, what do you do in the world, JP Maroney?
Currently I'm a marketing guy. I'm in a big limbo but
well, I'm looking at your condo and it looks like you were pretty successful. I mean, is that Miami in the background, or what is it?
That's a virtual background.
Oh, okay. You look like you're on the top of some penthouse in Miami, and I see the bay and everything.
No, I did have a giant home that the government already took away. So anyway,
so what I'm saying is that if you're successful, right, in society, it's an architected strategic plan, right? And that's what I have to tell these administrators. That what they say to me is, they would say, when I was first starting this, they would say, well, not everybody can do what you did when you come out. And I said, you didn't say that when I started, you know, and now you're seeing these changes. So I have this relationship with scores of wardens, you know, and directors of the system, and I turned them into being our advocates because of the scale that we're getting. But it's all about scale, right? If I don't get 1 million people going through our program, I'm not nearly as effective as if I'm just talking with you, right? That's why we have an ecosystem, right? We've got Justin that runs like the consumer division, and Scott's and the other people we hire that help that consumer part, and we work together. And then I work on the institutional side, and it's just this ongoing effort trying to see what we want to see 3 years from now. 5 years from now, I want to see U.S. parole reinstated. I want to see everybody getting time credits. I want to see furloughs extended. I want to see work release programs. That's all possible, but it's not possible if we don't work at scale. So that's that. And I see the director advocate. I was supposed to be at that wardens conference, right? I mean, but I already speak to all these wardens anyway. So I know that it's changing. It's just that, just as I tell people in our webinars, you got to choose which battle to fight. And it's super important to be strategic and deliberate. And that's what we try and show. But I'm very, very optimistic because of this director.
Very cool. Well, you know,
Are you
I
going
told
into
someone
the
the other
system,
day.
JP? Do you work with our
Yeah,
team?
so the SEC case first surfaced 2 years ago in April of 21, and then BOP got involved last
DOJ.
14 months. Yeah, sorry, DOJ got involved.
When
about
DOJ gets
14
involved,
months
BOP
ago,
is
so,
eventually going to get involved.
yeah. So
Have you
it's been
connected
a
with our team, with
process.
Scott or with
I have
Justin?
with Justin, but it's been a while. This
Good.
thing has just dragged on and dragged on.
Well, we wish you the best, buddy.
Yeah, no, I'll be in touch. And we're doing some, you know, I was going to say is you don't realize how big this ecosystem is and the needs that are there until you fall off in the hole. And
It's a wretched system.
yeah, so we're doing, you know, while I'm preparing and all of that, we're also doing what we can to try to support the process. So anyway, appreciate everything y'all are doing.
Appreciate you. I think Charlotte is the next hand up. Charlotte.
Michael, thank you so much for your support.
Hi.
For those that are incarcerated and, you know, before and after. It's been very helpful for me. My partner was incarcerated. He had to surrender on April 18th. And so now I'm trying to figure out, did he do his due diligence and what he was supposed to do prior? Watching all of your videos, I'm only able to speak with him like 15 minutes every other day, and he doesn't have access to email. He was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury 4 months before surrendering, and was given 4 extensions, you know, like 30 days, 60 days here, 30 days there. And then, you know, now he's incarcerated, and there's, you know, evidence, even the nurse, like they threw away all of his medical documentation. So I'm, you know, in process of getting that.
Where is he?
He was sent to FMC in Fort Worth.
So he's in a medical center.
And right. And we live in California. So
where do you live in California?
Venice Beach.
So there's Terminal Island. Was that not sufficient for him to get to TI? Was
I have no idea, yeah, why he got denied, but that was where we recommended him.
What's the length of the sentence?
57 months.
So there are things that you should probably be looking at. Is it a violent crime or a non-violent crime?
No, it's all drug related, marketing, trafficking online, and money laundering is another charge.
But no violence.
No violence.
Do you know his security level?
I do not. That's something I do need to find out.
Well, if he just surrendered in April,
find that on any of his documentation, like what security level?
You got to figure it out. It's a pain in the butt, but we could help you figure it out. I mean, there's a custody and classification manual that you could do, and you could just answer questions, and you can come up with that thing. It just takes some time. You could figure out what it should be, and then you could assess, is he in the right place? Then you can create an advocacy campaign to get him to TI. But if his medical condition is so severe, I mean, Fort Worth is a higher level of medical care than Terminal Island. Still, you're going to want to advocate for him because, you know, it's still the Bureau of Prisons, and you can learn a lot, I think, from our community just by reading, or if you need somebody to help for you, we hire, like we have the former medical director of the Bureau of Prisons that's on our team. I just don't know the challenges of your husband or your loved one.
Right. So yeah, he was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury. So by 2 different specialists, and they provided like an entire treatment plan that's needed. But this all happened, you know, because of a car accident 4 months before his surrender.
But after sentencing or before sentencing? After
sentencing.
So the judge did not know about this?
Well, the judge was informed about it through motions.
But after he imposed 57 months?
Correct.
That could work in his favor. in your boyfriend's favor on a compassionate release motion, or on, that can work in his favor. But you should like spend a lot of time on. Do you work with our team, or are you just like, how did you find out about us?
I have not. I actually met through Justin. He had been working with Justin, but he really kind of kept me separate from a lot of what was going on. And, he wasn't prepared to go in. He, was under the impression that he would be given more time, to deal with all of this. And then the judge, just basically denied his final motion to extend. And this was like on Friday prior to this last Tuesday, where I had to fly with him into Fort Worth. And now I'm going through his emails and finding all of this advocacy information. And so now I'm starting to read everything and watch the webinars, and I'm concerned that, like, did he do everything for RDAP or for First Step, or like, what is that? And how do I make sure that,
First Step is a law, so he doesn't have to do anything for that.
Okay.
That's just the law.
Okay.
But his release plan is something you should work toward, and you should learn too. Like, the more everybody learns about the system, the better off they are. Family, the individual. It's a brand new world, and you can't go into it expecting that your lawyer is going to be there to help you. This is a lot about learning yourself and learning how to advocate for yourself. And if you connect with Justin, I'm sure he'll give you some guidance too.
Right. Okay. So, okay. I'll continue watching your webinars and reading your book. And like, I've already.
Did you get Earning Freedom?
No. What is Earning Freedom?
Yeah, we'll send it to you. Reach out to Justin, and then we'll send you a copy.
Okay.
Okay.
So at this point though, is there something
he's super early. I mean, if he hasn't even if he just got there last Tuesday, he's got 30 days before they're going to have a team. And you kind of tell me after the team what he has. You can't change the fact if he didn't do things before that he's going to have to fight for them now. I would put together a realistic plan of attack, that's going to be say, okay, if he's got a 57-month sentence and I want to get him to TI, I would probably put a 12 to 18-month plan together. What am I going to do in 12 to 18 months to make it likely for him to get back home? And make sure also he has the medical attention he needs.
Right. That's something even the nurse told him he's not going to be able to be provided. And, after we did the calculation of his 57 months minus First Step minus RDAP, that was a calculation we did. It showed that he could get out like within a year and 3 months, which is something, they basically.
On 57 months, you could get out in 15. Yeah, that's probably realistic.
And so is that like best case scenario, or do I, try?
Yeah, I would call that. I mean, let's just do the math on it. 57 months minus 10% is 5.7. Half of that is like 3. It's like 9. It's almost 9. So call it 57, 47, 48 months. Then 12 months off for RDAP. 48 minus 12 is 36. Then say 12 months off for earned time credits. That's 24. Then halfway house, best case. Yeah, best case would be about 15 months. I think so.
Right.
Off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's kind of what the calculation that was provided. But then I'm wondering, like, is there something more that I can do to get him out sooner due to his?
I think that you've got to deal with reality. 15 months on a 57-month sentence, I would say, is a pretty good outcome. It's a very good outcome. But getting out is not the end game. He's got to get out and be successful.
Right.
He's got to get out and make sure that he's not picking up garbage on the freeway when he gets out. He's got to get out and be able to recalibrate. How old is he?
Right. He's 43.
So he's 43. Let's use the 15 months to make sure he's capable of, recalibrating and coming back to society strong and thinking about what he's got to do. You're going to learn all that in this book we're going to send you. Okay.
Okay. He definitely has a plan for when he gets out. He's very
is it?
successful at marketing, and he's also going to support me with a music academy.
What
for
did you just
kids.
say? What is his
musicians.
plan?
He's in well, he's a genius marketer. So he's able to help businesses through.
Yeah, that's a great skill, but he's got to
Actually,
use.
he's calling me right now.
Okay, take your call with him and I'll get the other questions. Thanks, Charlotte.
Okay, thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye. Hey, Lawrence. Unmute, Lawrence. Lawrence, can you unmute?
Michael, can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Yes. So the statement of reasons document is really interesting to me because I just got back my PSR. The probation officer recommended my sentence of 12 months and a day simply because she said we needed to send some kind of message to the world. So she thought probation was not a good option for me. I did a narrative. I worked with Brad, Justin, and Scott, but she didn't really seem to use the narrative at all.
Who's she? The probation officer?
Probation officer, yeah. She didn't really. All she said was,
Could you tell me about your hearing when you had your hearing with the probation officer? What did you say?
She understood that I was under tremendous stress and was abusing prescription opioids and was also prescribed a fentanyl patch and had just finished major surgeries and made a lot of bad decisions, obviously. And so she recognized that, but she said these weren't really mitigating reasons.
No, but my question for you is, what did you say to her at the pre-sentence investigation hearing?
You mean the whole interview?
In ways that you referenced that narrative, what did you say?
I said that, a lot of my offense conduct was associated with the fact that I was under the influence of many prescription drugs after I had a failed fusion surgery and was not thinking very rationally. I had
but that doesn't reference the narrative, right? Did you reference the narrative? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I said I sent her the narrative a couple days before the PSI. And then she said she would read it. And then she had questions directly related to the narrative at the PSI. But then I take that back. So originally the prosecution was asking for 24 to 30 months. She said 12 months and a day because based on what the defendant said, I believe that he would still need to do some kind of custody sentence because even though he was abusing drugs and making irrational decisions and he's had a great record of service, no prior criminal history, there's going to be other people that have defrauded PPP and we need to send a message to the world using him as an example. That's what she said in the PSR. And I'm like, well, that sucks. How do I influence this statement of reasons?
But it sounds like you did. If you said to me that the government wanted 36 months and she recommended a year and a day.
Yes.
That doesn't sound like a victory to you?
I guess I'm just, still hopeful.
What would you like to have? A get out of jail free card and $200?
No.
Yes, you would. Be honest.
Of course I would.
Okay. But you know what? This is what I was saying earlier. Let's look at this from the reality of where we are. Okay. You can't change the past.
Right.
I would say if you get a year and a day, that's a victory because you're going to be out in about 7 months.
Yeah. But shouldn't I still try to take another shot at it?
You could do what you want, but I can tell you, if you try to do something that's unrealistic, I don't know that helps. You got to deal with the world as it exists. And you've got to think about the people you're going to meet. They are not your friend. Don't think they're your friend. Think about What is their mindset? What motivates them? What is their job? How do they define success? Okay. If you only think about you, you're not nearly as strong as if you think about the entire complexity of the system. Of course, you don't want to go to jail. But if you pleaded guilty to a crime and you want to help yourself, you'd better weave into your statements and in your pathway that you fully appreciate the magnitude of the error and you're doing things to make things better.
Right.
And that's the way you don't make the things better by just saying, I don't want to go to jail. That's not going to move the needle. Nobody wants to go to jail.
Right.
You got to be different. You got to be strong, and you need a plan. And I would say you've already done a very good job if the prosecutor wanted 36 and you're already at 12 in a day.
Okay.
I don't know the crime, Larry. I don't know, Lawrence. I don't know the crime. I don't know the case. All I know is when I hear the prosecutor wants 36 and you got a year and a day, that's a very big victory. And then you're going to want to try and get out in 6 or 7 months.
Okay.
And then you're going to want to have a high level of liberty on supervised release. All of these things are like little victories along the way.
Right. Okay.
Don't think of the statement of reasons as a magic card. It's not. It's a tool to influence things ahead. The best thing you can do is articulate why you identify with the victim, what you've done to make things right, why the judge knows that you're working to reconcile and you'll never be in this position again, right? Those are the things those are the ways that you help yourself.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, it's 11:43. I think I have to be disconnecting. Is there any other questions that I didn't respond to? Let me look. I see there's a lot of chats. I hope my team has responded to those chats.
Michael,
Yes.
could you tell me when you're going to Leavenworth?
Hey, I am going to Leavenworth on May the 8th and the 9th.
Thank you.
Do you have a fam? Are you going to Leavenworth?
Well, actually, I'm going there the 5th and 6th to visit my son. Again, I'm in California. My son's in Leavenworth, so it's visitors for him are quite a journey.
Is he in the USP or is he in the camp?
He's in the camp.
I'll be on the camp on Tuesday, I think, and on Monday I'll be with the executive staff in the big institution.
Okay.
You let him know, making sure he signs up.
I most certainly will let him know.
And make sure he introduces himself to me.
I'll have him do that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Carper. All right, fellas, I wish that everybody has a fabulous weekend. And I don't know that I'll be here next weekend, but my partner Justin will if I'm not. So everybody be cool. Bye-bye.
Have a good week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.